This week on The Grit Crusade
is that hard seasons are always accomplishing in us a greater purpose, but we have to be willing to look around and see the greater purpose that's coming and allow the hard work to happen inside of us.
Hey, Grit Crusaders, welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm so excited to have a co-host. Whoop, whoop. Yay. So my name is Brooke Plack. I'm your co-host on the Grit Crusade podcast today. Not host. I usually say host.
Yeah.
If it's your first time, welcome. If it's not your first time, welcome back. And if you're a longtime listener, then you know my co-host already, Dani Hardy.
Hello.
Yay.
So excited.
Dani and I have been best friends for 30 years. Maybe like 30 and a half years.
No, I think we're right at 30.
Right at 30?
Yes.
Like we would have met when school started. So
Right.
yeah. And this podcast will come out in like January. So
Yeah.
30 years.
30 and a half. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I know, right?
Let's go with that.
Let's go. My son just turned 6 and he was 5 and a half up to the day before he turned 6.
Yes.
It's like you can't teach a 5-year-old 5 3/4.
No.
You know? Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
We'll go 30 and a half, even though it makes me feel old.
Right. So
Yes.
today on the podcast, we are launching a 4-episode miniseries. Dani and I are going to be talking about navigating. Big word. Did you Webster it? We should have Webstered it.
I didn't Webster it, but I did think about navigation to get you from one place to the next.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So if you
That's
have
it.
found yourself in one place and wanted to be in another,
Yeah.
this episode's for you.
There you go.
Yeah, it is. So we're going to break the four episodes up into hard seasons, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yep.
Grief, motherhood, and tension.
Yes.
Dani has this like beautiful, I shouldn't like call it like a monologue. I don't know how to call it. Speech, theory, thought process on tension, which I think is really cool. So
Yeah.
I think maybe we should say that one for last.
I think it should be last.
Yeah. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, though, navigating hard seasons.
Yeah.
So you've never been through a hard season in life, right?
Right. Just
Yeah.
riddled with them.
So what kind of hard seasons would someone be going through that like might be listening to this they're like, wait, should I listen to this episode or not? I don't know. So what would a hard season look like to them?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think a hard season could be any kind of transition. Transitioning with kids, transitioning in marriage, transitioning with career.
Yeah.
Transitions are always hard. But I also think transitions where we're learning who we are, those are hard seasons. Like when we're
Man.
really learning how to identify who we are and how we exist in the world and how we function in the world. Those can feel really like clunky seasons, which I think can be hard. But I don't know, Brooke. I have this growing theory in life that nothing is ever only one thing. And so hard seasons, though they are hard, are always riddled with something else.
Well, you said, though, the part that stands out to me is talking about how we find our place in the world.
Yeah.
You know, and who we are changes over time, which means how we feel our place in the world is also changes over time.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think transition, I feel like I'm in a season of transition. So I was talking to my new executive assistant, Rebecca. She's behind the camera. I always like to acknowledge the team we have behind the camera because they're not always on the screen, but they're the ones that make everything happen.
They're here.
And I was at lunch with her, my friend Elizabeth, the other day. We were talking about like a year ago this time, the leader of our nonprofit took a new position. And I finished out the year as the board chair. This time this year, we don't have a director at our Chamber of Commerce as of the recording of this. We will by the time it launches. And I'm helping lead that ship with some other amazing leaders.
Right.
And all the transitions I've had in staff and people in my life in the last 12 months have been huge. And you don't realize what an impact it has on you.
Right.
You know, like for me, it's with my executive assistant, Dia, that most everybody that have watched the podcast have seen her on here. She's been on here twice and did all the behind the scenes work. She was more than just an executive assistant, though. She was a constant presence in my life.
Right.
And I'm so excited for her in her next chapter, but it still is a transition.
Right.
It's
Sure.
still a hard season, you know, and figuring out what that looks like and what does our friendship look like now?
Right. Just
You
the
know?
evolution of that.
Yeah. And
For
it's
sure.
not bad or good. It's just different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. I'm encouraged to hear you talk about hard seasons because as you're talking about it, you're not just focusing on the hard. Like you're able to approach it with curiosity.
Yeah.
To say like this transition that you've been through with Dia, your executive assistant, like that you're able to approach that and say, what's next? Like, what's that going to look like for her? What's that going to look like for me? What's that going to look like for us? Because I think our tendency can be to say, oh, this is hard. And we want to throw up our hands and we want to just like, have that audible groan, when really I think we're being invited into an exploration in hard seasons to say, how can I approach this with curiosity, and what can I glean from this? Because when we come into hard seasons with our fists clenched, then we're not open-handed enough to receive whatever there is to gain from a hard season. And then we're not only struggling through it, we're not gaining from it what is intended.
I think that's so good. I saw a little meme posted on Facebook today that was like, sometimes I just wish God would walk into my room and sit on my bed and tell me what to do. And I responded to the post, and I was like, I know this sounds weird, but when I'm in the quiet and I'm alcohol free and I've been eating clean and like taking care of myself, I kind of feel like I can hear God in those moments, but I feel like it has to do with being, not saying that I got it all figured out, because Lord knows I don't.
Sure.
But it's things I've learned that I maybe didn't used to do that I do now. But when I approach it with an open hand of, I don't know.
Right.
So the only thing that can happen here, God, is you to help me figure it out.
Right.
But it's having that curiosity and that humbleness to show up anyway and have the conversation, whether it's spiritually or with the person in general, or, it's just not having, like, I like how you said, those closed fists.
Yeah.
Oh, because that's so true.
Yeah. Well, I think about that meme, just this idea of like, okay, I'm going to be really still and I'm going to listen. But then we also have to cleanse ourselves of anything that would cause us to be in disagreement with what it is that God might want to teach us in a season, or that there might be for us to glean experientially from a season.
Yeah.
That if we're so conditioned to only look for what we want to see, or we're so conditioned to only look for the wisdom or the knowledge from a season to look a certain way, and we don't have that open-handed posture, then would we really want to hear what God had to say if he sat down on our bed to tell us exactly what was going to lie ahead? Like, if we're not approaching it with a heart that's cleansed, a heart that's taken care, like we're taking care of ourselves, we're leaning into our overall, like, just personal development of becoming more like Christ. Because that's my story, is that my goal in my heart is always Christ-likeness. And so in everything that I do, that's my goal, and that's my aim, is always to be more like him and to be less like me. But if I'm not allowing the parts of me, the unhealth parts, the parts that might want to partake too much in one thing or the other, and have a lesser dependency on him, if I'm not reducing those things in me, then am I really going to be ready to listen to him when he begins to talk to me?
That's good. That's really good. I had a conversation with God yesterday. People would think this is weird if they're not like spiritual, but be here for it, because here we are. Open hands. Come on. But like, I literally felt God. I was putting laundry away upstairs, and it's like really quiet in my closet because it's like in the middle of the house, but upstairs.
Yeah.
And I was like, but why didn't you already tell me that? And he was like, because you wouldn't have heard it anyway.
Right.
Like, that's how I felt, like that internal conversation I had. And I'm like, I wouldn't have noticed. I probably wouldn't even have taken the time, or it would have been way too scary. Because if God just opened it up.
Right.
Oh, God.
Right. Well, and those hard seasons are oftentimes what cultivate our readiness. Those hard seasons are what cultivate and prepare us for what's next and for what's up ahead. I mean, I think about in our neighborhood, they're doing some repaving of the roads. And so they've had to come in and they grate the roads. They dig up the asphalt. They make it really hard. It's really tough and it's hard to drive through, like all those little rocks get in your tires, and it's really annoying. But it's not fun for that work to happen first. But that work of digging up what was allows the new thing to take hold.
Well, I like that.
Yeah. And so that is what I think about inside of hard seasons, is that hard seasons are always accomplishing in us a greater purpose, but we have to be willing to look around and see the greater purpose that's coming and allow the hard work to happen inside of us. If that's the tilling up of our soul, the soil of our soul, right, for a good plan planting to take place. Like whatever that looks like, if that's in your business, if that's in your family, if that's in your personal life, if that's in your faith, like whatever it is, that we have to have a level of readiness, a level of preparedness to say, God, whatever you want to do in me, or like this season, whatever it longs to do inside of me, I want to be ready for it. I want to be able to receive what it is. And if all we're ever doing is scoffing at the hard, scoffing at what's difficult, then we're never going to receive from it what it's intended to be.
I think bitterness can get in the way of that.
Sure.
You know, because the thing that is hard, difficult, and hard seasons is to not allow the bitterness of what you're experiencing. The why me? Why me? Why now? Whether it's like, I think like medically, cancer, things that are life altering, of why am I having to deal with this? Because if we're constantly stuck there, we can't get to the place of allowing all the digging to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
But I think we can get into a why me mindset when we are so focused. I mean, we're titling this series about navigating different things, and this one is navigating hard seasons. But if we're only focused on, if our mindset is only focused on where we're headed and not where we are, then we lose half of the process, right? Because navigation, I mean, I think about, like, we've driven out to Colorado before. We like to fly, but we also love to drive because we like the journey of getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And so when you're navigating somewhere, like we're going to Colorado, it isn't only about getting to Colorado. It's also about driving through New Mexico, which is beautiful. And if we didn't appreciate the journey, then we would miss out on so much of the beauty along the way.
Up to Colorado?
It's gorgeous. It is gorgeous.
Long way around.
It is, but it's so beautiful. Like, it's worth the drive.
Never
and so I
been.
think about the times in our life when maybe we have to go the long way around, and that feels like a really hard place. It feels like a hard season, and it has a good purpose in us. But if we're only focused on where we're going to get in the long run, we lose a part of the process, which also has a potential to cultivate us to be prepared for what's ahead.
I think I struggle with that.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm a very future-oriented person, which some people think is good. And it is good in some ways. But sometimes I get so consumed with, like, the destination that it causes undue anxiety. Because then what if it doesn't work? And what if it,
Sure.
you know, all the things. And then also it's like, just sit in today. Just sit here today. You know, we've opened this new building with Empire Kids. And so, you know, you build out a several $1 million facility like that, and it's beautiful and it's state of the art. And people are like, oh my gosh, I bet they have so much money. Anytime someone has built a brand new facility, let me tell you, they don't have any money.
Right.
Like, they just spend it all. Okay.
Right.
They spend it all on the building or the new mortgage payments. Just like buying a new house. It's like, look at this big fancy house. Yeah. Well, they scraped together every cent they had to make the payment. Right.
Right.
And so we're in a hard season because we went from having a building that we've been able to afford comfortably for a long time to now we are stretched. And sometimes I can get so worried about, okay, all right, now to make sure I have this done, and then we need to grow this many, and we need to do this here and this here, to like sit in that damn building and just breathe for a second and be so grateful and blessed for what is right here, right now, and how far we've come, you know?
Absolutely.
And I think that's my Enneagram 1, always going on to the next thing, but I have to learn to sit and be in the hard season.
Right. Well, and I will say I am not great at it. I'm also futuristic is one of my top 5 strengths, and so I'm always looking ahead and envisioning what's next. But I'm blessed to have a husband. Dusty is a 2 on the Enneagram. He is very present-minded, and I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. I'm very future oriented. But
so maybe that's a 3 in me. Is a 3 in me that's the future oriented?
Well,
maybe I said it wrong with the 1. One's like to doing.
Yeah. But so Dusty is able to sit in the present, and he has the gift of the strength of connectedness. And so he loves to just connect with whatever moment is existing right now. And so he helps me in that.
Yeah.
And so I think another thing to add to this conversation is that as we're navigating hard seasons, it's so important to look and see who we're surrounding ourselves with. Because if we're surrounding ourselves only with people who are just like us, then we're not going to glean from anything what we're fully intended to. because he helps me to shift my perspective, even in a hard season, to look around and see what's happening that's good. Look around and be present to this moment. Be present with our kids where there's laughter and there's joy and there's so much fun. When things are just outright crappy in other areas of my life, I have to really tune into the places where things are really good, and he helps me to do that.
I love
and so
that.
I think a challenge for us is that when we're facing a hard season, to look around and say, who am I surrounding myself with? And are they helping me in this season, or are they holding me back in this season?
Those are hard decisions, though, you know? Like, I don't think I've ever, like I said, had a year like this past year. So this episode will come out in January. Actually, I think we're the New Year's launch.
Hey,
I think we'll
look
be
at that.
launching year 2 of the Grit Crusade with this podcast.
Look at that.
I know, right?
Thanks.
I know. Gosh, it's amazing. So 2023, I guess I could put it pretty much, was probably, at least I acknowledge it as a lot of transition.
Right.
If I look back, there probably was a lot more, but maybe I'm just getting older and wiser and realizing more. But looking at all the transition that you go through, you know, and realizing like what was so important 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I don't even remember that now, you know? Mm-hmm. And so if you don't find those moments of joy, those moments, those little glimmers,
Right.
you know, then you're going to miss them all.
Right.
You know, and it's, man, I feel like transition is like the highlight of hard seasons for so many people. Like I can't think of any hard season that's not a transition.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that when you are, Dusty always says that we have to decide ahead of time who we're going to be when hard things happen.
That's good.
Like we have to decide on the other side of it who we're going to be. And so I think about when you're in a hard season, you have to sort of command your own soul to have the willingness to bounce back, whatever it takes.
Right, yeah.
And so it's the bouncing back, it's the coming back into your life and the fullness of that which you're intended to live, even when you've navigated something really hard. And whether that hard thing has been grief or has been relationship or has been career loss or family, whatever that hard thing has been, deciding how we're going to come back, how we're going to bounce back into the fullness of what we're intended to live into, I think is so much of what allows us to stay present to the moment and allows the work of the hard season to do its job in us, is that ability to bounce back. But that comes with the knowledge of deciding ahead of time who we're going to be when the trials are going to come.
I mean, if there's one thing we could teach our kids besides to, you know, be kind and love Jesus, is know who you're going to be when the hard stuff comes.
Yeah.
You know?
I have to tell you this story. I haven't told you this on
God.
a personal level yet. It's just funny. Okay, so Dusty and I went out of town a couple weeks ago just for like a few days to get away. We went to an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, y'all. It was like Broken Bow, Oklahoma. Like
Yeah, okay.
middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
but gorgeous state park.
I've seen somehow, probably because you went there, I don't know. And my friend Abigail recently went there, that I was a recent guest on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I've seen pictures of Broken Bow.
Yeah.
And it looks beautiful there. And
It's
I'm like, I
gorgeous.
feel like all of a sudden I need to go to Broken Bow, Oklahoma. Like, I don't know.
Yes, it was so beautiful. We went and we didn't do a whole lot for those 3 or 4 days, but we really enjoyed the rest. And so we had this great Airbnb, like multiple fireplaces, great hot tub on the back porch, like just, you know.
Yes, that works.
Just the works, right? And we're enjoying this. And on our last day, we were just resting around the cabin. And like I say cabin, and you think like dark, like no, this was like bright, white, airy, just beautiful place. Anyway, so we're resting that last day because it's raining outside and everything. And we decided we're going to go out for a drive. We're going to go grab some food to cook for dinner, and we're going to go for a drive. So we do that. Well, my husband has like the smallest bladder in the world, apparently, because anytime we go anywhere, he always has to go to the bathroom. And so he's like, hey, I've got to stop. So we pull over at like a little rest area and we stop. He goes and uses the bathroom, comes back and closes the door to my car, and the car door will not shut, like will not shut. And so he gets out, and of course, like a man, he tries to just slam it. Like that's gonna
do it.
That's the remedy here, is it's gonna slam the door. And so it still won't shut. And so he knows all things about cars. So he starts like disassembling the door panel.
Right there.
Right there.
At the rest area.
At the hysteria. He disassembles the whole door panel, and I'm like, what in the world? So I just start walking around the car praying because I'm like, I can't help disassemble the door panel, so I can pray. So I start walking around the car praying. He's disassembling the door panel. Y'all, you can't make it up. We're on vacation, right? This is supposed to be restful.
Yes.
And so he disassembles the whole thing, figures out what's wrong, and then he's like, our phones don't work. So we're in the middle of a state park. We have no cell
service.
Reception, no internet, nothing.
You're done.
So he's like, we have to get out to where I can start calling some places to look for this part. And so he drives back.
Off on holding the door?
He, with one hand, is holding the steering wheel, and the other hand is holding the door closed. So we're driving down the highway.
Are you just laughing hysterically? Are you terrified?
Well, at one point, I'm like, Lord, please forgive us for our stupidity and help us and protect us from whatever might come, because it's like
the door's about to fall off the car.
It's just dumb, right? And so he's holding the door shut. We get out back to like civilization, and we can look some things up, and he starts calling places. Nowhere has the part that we need. Nowhere. And so we're leaving the next day, and we're driving home for the 3 hours or whatever. And so
he's gonna have a hand cramp from holding
right.
the door.
And so it's like, we can't go 70 miles on the interstate with this door. So what are we gonna do? And he's like, oh, and it's supposed to rain that night. So he's like, what? So he said, I guess we're going to have to tape it shut.
Did you duct tape the door?
And so here we are in front of our like beautiful Airbnb in this beautiful neighborhood full of Airbnbs. And we are duct taping the door shut. And then he had to put a tarp over it because it was going to rain.
Did you have a tarp?
No, he went to Walmart.
You had to go buy a tarp.
He had to drive 20 minutes into town.
Hand cramp.
With the door, holding the door shut to go buy the duct tape and buy the tarp. And we're doing all of this out front. And it's like, this is the moment, right?
Yep.
Where we thought, okay, this was going to be just a restful day. But we had to decide, who are we going to be?
Before we show up.
Right.
I love that.
And no matter what hard things come, we're going to choose to be restful. And so he went and ran all the errands. I cooked dinner so that when he got back, dinner was done. We still watched a movie that night. We still sat in the hot tub. Like, we still chose how we were going to end our day, even after a hard thing happened.
Yeah.
Because we'd already decided who we were going to be inside of a hard season.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's the posture you chose, know, because you could have let that ruin your whole day and then say, how was Broken Bow? Oh my God, it was terrible. The door broke. Now it's like, oh, well, it was great and this Airbnb was awesome, but let me tell you this funny story.
Exactly.
So did you fix the door? Is the door fixed?
The door is now fixed. The whole way home, he's like 6'3", and so the whole way home, whenever we had to stop, he was climbing in and out of the passenger door.
And at that point, you had to be laughing.
But then he found a part in Little Rock, got the door fixed, all was well.
Good.
Yeah, but it's a great story now.
Yeah, it is. That's a great story. Well, I feel like now's a good time to do trivia in the trenches.
Okay.
Okay, so I normally research all this stuff, and I give you a backstory and everything.
Yeah.
All I have is an answer.
Okay.
Today, because it's that good of a question.
Oh, good.
Are you ready for this?
Are you asking this to me?
I'm asking you the question.
Oh, okay. I'm ready.
You ready? Okay.
I'm prepared.
You won't know the answer, but your face your face will be priceless when I ask the question.
Good. I always love whenever you do this to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's 30 years and a half of friendship.
Yeah. Okay. I'm ready.
All right. What was the original name of Vaseline?
Oh gosh.
The answer's even better. Are you ready?
All I can think is petroleum jelly.
Yeah. No.
Vaseline.
You ready?
No.
Are you ready for it?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. You ready for it?
No, I'm not at all.
I can't even say it. Wonder Jelly.
Oh, good.
I'm like, is that like Wonder Bread or Wonder?
Oh,
God,
where did, no.
There it is. Yeah,
Wonder
Jelly. You'll never look at Vaseline the same again.
Working wonders.
There it is. I guess
Wonder Jelly.
Yep, helping that chapped skin one day at a time. I don't know.
Wonder Jelly.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And then they got to Vaseline. And I have no history. I have no information about how the name Vaseline came about. Normally I do. I just got stuck on the answer on this one.
I bet that when people turned this podcast on, they weren't thinking we were going to talk about duct tape and Vaseline all
but here we are.
same.
Welcome to the Grit Crusade. This is where we get real in the trenches.
I love it.
And if you need anything in the trenches, Vaseline and duct tape will probably help you.
Yes.
I mean, that's pretty. That and some WD-40, you're good.
I mean, I had to buy WD-40 at the gas station for the door.
Yes, and you smelled like it the whole way home then, too.
It was-
because it's like the smell, you cannot mistake it.
It was the smallest $14 bottle of
like
WD-40.
little teeny tiny. And the little bitty red straw that comes off at the end.
$14.
Yes,
What a ripoff.
There's your hard season. I know, right? And it was probably like $3 on Amazon or
Stupid.
at Walmart. But
Yeah. Here we are.
Convenience. Yeah, gas station on the corner. You supported somebody's grandma that weekend. I know.
Yeah.
All right. What else are we going to talk about hard seasons? Anything else you
Well,
want to add
I
before we
mean,
wrap up?
Yeah. So, inside of a hard season, what would you encourage someone with as far as how to rest inside of a hard season and how to take care of themselves? Because you admittedly today have talked about this past season of your life, this past year, being one of a lot of transition, but you also have navigated a lot of just learning how to take better care of your health, taking better care of yourself, your mind, and your body. So what would you encourage someone with inside of a hard season of prioritizing their own health and care?
So I'm really good at sharing what I did, more than I'm always saying, like, this is what you should do.
Sure.
In hopes that someone finds inspiration from it, not that they actually do it exactly the same way.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's how we always encourage, is from our own story.
So for me, it was not focusing on the hard season as much. Does that make sense? So, like, I came out of the pandemic, and so that's been about 3 years. So it'll be almost 4 years by the time the podcast launches that the pandemic started. Wow, that was fast. And realized that I had no hobbies, and so in the hard season of this last year, I've continued to focus on my hobbies. Now, I didn't get to garden as much this summer as I normally do because it was kind of a crazy year, and we did still find some time to hike because we like to hike. So finding something that you enjoy, whatever it is, and spending time doing it, even when you think you don't have the time to spend doing it. Does that make sense? Like, for example, I'm so busy, I can't. Yes, you can.
Right.
Actually, you have to, or your mindset and entire life is going to suffer.
Yeah, it's good.
And so realizing that no matter how many hours I, stress or pine over a budget for a new building, it's not going to change the fact that the calendar's turning and memories can be made. So I can spend my time behind the screen looking at spreadsheets, or I can actually live.
Yeah.
Like, this is living. And so figuring out that this is life. It's not where you're going is not life. Life is what's happening right now.
It's on the journey.
This is the life. Yeah, it's on the journey. Like you were saying, it's the journey to Colorado. Like, we're all journeying to the same destination, death. That's it. Now what happens after death is something that we have to choose as well. But like, the journey is all end of life. Like, our human state's not going to last. And so remembering that, no, I actually do have to do these things because that's what I want out of my life. I don't want to look back on the past year and think about just the hard stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And so I'm not the best at finding rest in a way of like, let me just sit down and take a nap. Like, to me, what's restful is doing the things that I enjoy.
Well, but that's the difference between rest and sleep.
Okay, true. Yeah.
So let's call it what it is. Like,
that's true,
rest is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And that's a way that we tend to our own souls and tend to our minds and tend to our bodies, which then when you go back to the spreadsheet, you're better equipped to actually do the work in front of you.
So true. And I also believe that work expands in the time we allow it. So if I allow myself 80 hours a week to work, I'm going to work 80 hours a week. But if I allow myself 26 or 30, that's what I'm going to get. I'm going to get this stuff done. The other thing you asked about was taking like self-care, So I realized about halfway through this year, and I know I'm going to get crucified for saying this, but I don't gain weight. Like, I just don't. I wear the same size clothes I wore in junior high.
Yeah.
But not this year. This year, that did not happen this year. I had a hip injury in 22 that I somehow nursed as an excuse for a year and a half when my hip was no longer injured and I was released from physical therapy. And so I had like fallen off the wagon of working out, which mentally is something that I probably do more mentally than physically, like for myself.
Sure.
So come July, after we got back from our family vacation, I realized I had gained like 12 pounds.
Right.
I'm 5 foot tall. Do you know how many pant sizes 12 pounds is when you're 5 foot tall? Like 3. And so I was like, oh, what has happened here?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't about the weight. It was about me not focusing on myself. I wasn't getting up in the mornings and working out. Well, you know what? That's when I listen to scripture. And that's when I listen to my Bible recap podcast on the way to work out. And then that, or I do it while I'm running. And so like those things, like my habits that I've built over all these years, like they backslid.
Yeah.
And I had to like have a moment of, this is not who I want to be. And also another note on weight is it's not ever about just the pant size. You know, it has to do with the rest of your health that starts to compromise. I already have a heart condition, so I don't need to be carrying around an extra 12 pounds that I didn't need to start with. And so just realizing that I've got to get back into routine.
Yeah.
I've got to get back into the things that I'm always doing. I told Justin, I said, is there like, can we have a code word of like, hey, you've gained a bunch of weight and you're not taking care of yourself and on this relationship? And he's like looking at me like, you have lost your mind. I am never saying that to you.
Smart man.
But yeah,
smart
I
man.
know. But I'm like, I need somebody to like wave a flag like, yoo-hoo, you're not doing the things you normally do. Because I think no matter how like efficient or productive or whatever you are, you're lying if you say that there's not times that you're like more invested in taking care of yourself and less invested in that, you know? And then even like small things like, so overwhelm is a natural feeling for me that I tend to push through. So I don't stop at the overwhelm wall. And so it leads to increased anxiety. And I've learned that about myself. So now I have these really nice little hammock chairs on our front porch that we got when we were in Canada by a Canadian company. And they're like hand woven. And they're not anything fancy. But my office is right by my front porch. And so when I'm working and I get to the overwhelm, I'll go out to the porch and like sit in the chair and like check my emails from my phone. So I'm still being productive. I'm still working, but I need a minute. And so on the flip side, it doesn't lead to like an as empty of a cup.
Yeah.
Because I take that minute. But I think that has to do with self-awareness of how you actually feel.
Yes.
And when you are in our generation, so I'm 39 now and you're 38. Yeah. So we were raised by people in their 60s to 70s right now.
Yeah.
And so they were raised by people who were in the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Or kids of people from the Great Depression. And that led to a whole generation of emotional stuffers, our parents, who told us, you don't have it as hard as we did. And then we grew up saying, we're fine. Everything's fine. We'll be fine. Everything's fine. And then to learn on this side of life, no, I do actually need to feel right through that.
Right.
I need to feel right through all those feelings I'm feeling right now.
That's right.
Because if I don't feel them now, I'm going to have to feel them later. And that's where that digging comes up that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And I've learned it's so much easier to feel it now than to have to unearth it later.
Yeah, because you can either feel it now or you can feel it later and all of the collateral damage it does.
And the trauma.
For
and
later.
Yes. And the people in your life that have been affected by your bad habits or behaviors or, you know, and I was telling someone the other day that like a younger version of me would cry like a lot.
Yeah.
Like I would be, when we open in a new building, for example, and all the things that have come with working with the bank and all this, I would find myself crying a lot. I hadn't shed a tear this entire last 2 years because I've learned to not let my cup get so empty.
Right.
Right. And it's not 100%, but it's like enough that I am a healthier version of myself.
Right.
Not like healed and done. And, you know, I don't think there's ever a done moment on this side of heaven. Right. But just giving yourself a minute to realize that you don't have to get to that terrible, stressed out disaster spot.
Yeah. The hard seasons, we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, we really do.
In order to navigate them, in order to realize that nothing exists mutually exclusive of itself. Everything's intermingled in our lives. And that we can take the margin that we have and we can make margin where it doesn't exist to take care of ourselves. I read
an article the other day, and I think, if I'm not misquoting it, they called them time pockets. So like if you're somebody, some people do time blocking where they'll say, and even if you work 8 to 5 job, that's kind of a version of time blocking. From 8 to 5, I'm at work.
Yeah.
Okay. Or if you work from home from 9 to 1, I'm at my computer.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at 2:40 for I leave to pick my son up for school. So there's a time pocket from 1 to 1:40 or 2:40, so an hour and 40 minutes. And figuring out how to take those time pockets and have some of them they stay empty on purpose.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
And it's like, what? But it's so important.
It is.
To have a minute. you know, and maybe it's an age thing, right? I don't know if my 20-year-old, like you were talking about earlier, we're talking about how God speaks to us and you can't tell you everything because some of it you would never even hear. You would be too distracted to hear. But I think too, like, there's something about being in your 30s. I'm be turning 40 next year.
Yeah.
That my 20-year-old self probably wouldn't even have heard it.
Sure, because you weren't ready.
I wasn't ready. Mm-hmm. No, I hadn't had all that, the journey.
Yeah. And there are things that your 45, 50-year-old self will be able to hear that your 39-year-old self never could.
Right? That's good.
There's more hard to come.
Yeah.
But because of that, there's more good to be gained. There's more growth to be had. There's more joy to be found along the way.
But I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning. If we approach it open-handed.
Right.
Because if we're coming at it with closed fists.
Right.
I don't think any of that's going to happen.
Sure. Curiosity goes a long way on the navigation of hard spaces.
Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. Let's close there.
Let's do it.
That was a perfect closing.
Thanks.
I love that.
Closer.
Yeah. Closer. Yeah. Yes. All right. Until next time. Thanks for listening to The Grit Crusade. I'm Brooke Plack. Join me again next week on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. This podcast is produced by ClintonCreative.com.